These are my top 10 favorite Masters of the Universe figures of all time.
By the power of Grayskull.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Lawrence, over at Mighty Comics and Collectibles, and today, with all this nostalgia going on with the Masters of the Universe film set to hit theaters in June of 2026, it got me thinking, what were some of my favorite Masters of the Universe action figures from the 1980s? Now, with that said, I loved all the figures that came out, but I remember as a kid playing with some more than others. So today, I'm going to give you my top 10. But before we get into the video, like always, I remind you guys, if you're not a current sub of the channel, do yourself a favor, hit that sub button. You won't regret it. You will get awesome vintage videos like this. Can't get it anywhere else. Do me a favor, hit that like button for me as well. And with that said and out of the way, let's check out my top 10. So we're actually going to start off with an honorable mention, believe it or not. I could not include this character considering he was one of my favorites from the cartoon as well as the toy line. But to me, his playability was not that great. And of course, we're talking about Orko. Now, looking at this one on the card, all the Motu figs were phenomenal looking on the card. That's what made this line so special, in my opinion. Now, with that said, Orko came with his own drawstring and a couple of magic tricks, so on and so forth, even though, to be honest with you, they weren't that great. But that's okay. Love the character. I just wish he could stand up on his own without using that ripcord to spin him around. The playability, like I said, wasn't the greatest, so it left something for this character to be desired. But here you see him pictured with his mini comic and everything he came with. This is my Orko from my vintage Masters of the Universe collection. But now let's get into this list, and at number 10 is Cobra Khan. I absolutely loved this figure growing up as a kid, filling him up with water, squirting everyone in my vicinity. That's what really made this figure great. Now again, on the card, absolutely beautiful. In fact, when I was a young adult, probably about 22, 23 years old, I was collecting all these figures back on the card, and I wish I still had them, but back in the day, I wanted to buy a house, so I sold them all. As you can see pictured here, he came with this bright orange gun that he always came with. Now, other iterations of Cobra Khan gave him a slightly different shade of orange for that gun, but to me, it really never mattered. Later on in He-Man lore, they would go on to say he was part of the Snake Men. I never really agree with that, considering he's one of the first figures that came out. I think he was second or third wave. You guys correct me down below. But either way, he's at number 10. But this is my personal Cobra Khan from my vintage Masters of the Universe collection. Next up is a later addition to the Masters of the Universe line, and it is Too Bad. You guys see him here on card, a great looking figure to have on card, but I remember getting this figure later on in my Masters of the Universe journey. I was probably around 8 or 9 years old, and I absolutely was smitten with this figure. The colors are great with the blues, the oranges, and the purples, but for a figure to have two head, two arms, and two legs, I always thought it was a great idea. Now, playability wasn't the greatest for this figure either, but it was a nice heavy figure, sometimes hard for him to stand up on his own, considering the chest part was really heavy. Of course, he came with his bright orange shield which matched his armor, but again, a great figure from later on in the line that I think is so iconic because of the two heads. Here is my Too Bad out of my personal collection. At number 8 is one of the more popular characters that came out from the Masters of the Universe line. Here we have Spikor. And again, I remember when this figure came out, people were so excited for this figure. He looks so much different than anything that came out during that time period. Of course, he came with his bright orange mace, but on his opposite hand was a slide-in, slide-out pitchfork, which was unique to this character. Of course, you see him pictured with the mini comic, as you see him from behind, but this is the first Masters of the Universe character that I remember being so unique and so different from anything we had seen before. His playability was outstanding, considering you'd match him up against He-Man or some of the heroic warriors, and they'd fall right down, considering he had spikes all over his body. At least that's what I dreamt when I was a kid. Here is my loose Spikor from my Masters of the Universe vintage collection. At number 7, let's get back to some heroic warriors. We have Mekaneck, one of my absolute favorite heroic warriors. So colorful, so beautiful on card. This is one of the ones I wish I still had kept before I sold my whole collection off. Of course, he came with a big, bright yellow club, which to me didn't really make much sense for the character. Not sure why he had it. Had really nothing to do with his elongated neck, but of course you remember his playable feature when you twist his waist is his neck would grow. Now, this next picture is probably infamous with Masters of the Universe collectors. I don't know why we would always take off their armor. It was a bitch to get back on, but either way, you find a lot of these figures loose without the armor nowadays. But either way, one of my faves. Here is my Mekaneck from my Masters of the Universe collection. At the 6th spot is one of the more likable characters from the line. We have Mossman. I cannot tell you guys how many hours I spent outside putting Mossman through the dirt, through the trees, through the grass, in the bushes, wherever I could hide him from all the other figures out there. Now, with that said, on card, Mossman is absolutely beautiful. And for some reason, there are a lot of this one still out there mint on card if you are that type of collector. Now, with that said, Mossman came with this brown mace. There are other iterations of the figure with a different color mace that probably came from the weapons pack. You could see him from behind right here. But again, Mossman was one of the more playable figures I ever had growing up, and he's at number 6 for me. Here's my personal Mossman from my vintage loose collection. Rounding out the top 5 is the evil robot of Skeletor, Faker. Now, to me, he was also one of the more playable figures of the line. Basically, a repaint of He-Man with a sticker on his chest, pretending that he was a robot. Now, on card, Faker is the most beautiful, in my opinion, Masters of the Universe vintage toy to be sealed on card with the colors. He absolutely looks phenomenal. He did not come with He-Man's chest armor. He came with Skeletor's chest armor, just painted in bright orange. I cannot tell you how many hours I had Faker going up against He-Man with Skeletor in the background. That's why he was such a playable figure and great idea for this toy line. Now, to me, he's at number 5, but maybe for many of you, he would rank somewhere else on the list. This is my Faker from my personal collection. At number 4, we have Prince Adam, of course. I cannot tell you how many times myself and probably many others stood Prince Adam up, raised his right arm with a power sword, and said, "By the power of Grayskull, I have the power." And of course, he would disappear, and then we would have He-Man. Every Masters of the Universe kid's dream. Every little boy or girl did this probably a million times with this toy. Now, to me, the biggest thing with Prince Adam was his vest and his belt. I absolutely loved the way he looked with the painted on shirt, the painted on pants, and the vest was cool. But that belt, anybody who knows who had this character, if you took that thing off enough, it would be so loose that you could not get it back on. Regardless, extremely playable character from the 80s toy cartoon, and then of course in the actual toy line, because we had to go from Prince Adam to He-Man. It was a no-brainer. This is my Prince Adam from my loose Masters of the Universe collection. Now, at the 3 spot was probably the most playable character from the Masters of the Universe line, and of course it is Trapjaw. This figure was so iconic. Not only did Trapjaw look great on card with that incredible power ring, but he came with an assortment of weapons that could be changed in and changed out whenever you wanted. I love this character from the cartoon, and I absolutely adored it from the vintage toy collection. Now, as you can see what he looks like from behind with his green utility belt where he could store all his interchangeable parts. An iconic character where we could mouth words with his Trapjaw and actually slide him down a rope. I remember seeing that on the original Masters of the Universe commercials. I thought he was great. The most playable action figure from the line, in my opinion. This is my personal Trapjaw out of my Masters of the Universe collection. Now, at number 2, we have the most powerful man in the universe, He-Man. And I can tell you right now, if you're a true Masters of the Universe fan, this figure has to make your top 3, in my opinion. The most important character, the one you focused on the most, playing with your toys. So again, I want to hear from you guys down in the comments. Is He-Man in your top 3? For me, he's gotta be. Now, with that said, of course, he came with his chest harness, his shield, his battle axe, and of course, 1/2 of the power sword. Such an iconic character. I remember, of course, any of these characters that came with his chest armor where you could take it off and then try to put it back on, another pain in the ass. But I don't know why we did it as a kid. But He-Man has to be up there with the most playable, considering he is the focus of the entire line. Here is He-Man on Battle Cat from my vintage Masters of the Universe collection. Now, at the top spot, we have to have this character, in my opinion, the greatest antagonist of 1980s cartoons. I actually did a video a long time ago about the top 80s cartoon villains of all time, and I'm going to give you a hint. Skeletor was at the top spot. The most iconic villain of all time, in my opinion. Here you see him on card, and he is absolutely masterful. I'm going to show you my latest pickup. I just picked up a really beat up Skeletor mint on card. Absolutely love this figure. I wanted to re-add it back into my collection. But of course, he came with his chest armor, his loincloth, 1/2 of the power sword, and his Havoc staff. An iconic looking character which cannot be reproduced, in my opinion. As you can see him from the back, there were a ton of iterations of Skeletor. Here we have the half boots version, which you can actually see is missing the paint along the back of his heels and his calves. An iconic version of the character. But to me, this one cannot be at the top spot, considering I played with him the most when I was a kid. Here is my Skeletor out of my personal collection, riding Battle Cat. So that's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, a blast from the past. I remember playing with these toys from when I was 5 or 6 years old, all the way up till I was like 11 or 12. So with that said, Motu was my favorite. Of course, I did enjoy Transformers, Voltron, Thundercats, and so on and so forth. But do me a favor. I want to hear down in the comments, what was your favorite action figure that you grew up with as a kid, whether it was Motu or it was something else. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics Collectibles saying thank you for watching, happy collecting, and I'll talk to you guys soon.